Hello and welcome. Today we're in Assetto Corsa to create the first video of a series I wanted to try creating. The idea behind it is a bit of a long story, so I'll try and start from the beginning. The inspiration began with a video by Jimmy Broadbent, where Jimmy simulated driving his favourite car, the Ford GT40, at a mod of Le Mans from 1967. And this had me thinking, isn't that the same GT40 that battled Ferrari at Le Mans in 1966, and which incidentally is the same year my parents got married. And then later I'm browsing YouTube and a suggested video is a documentary film entitled Cobra Ferrari Wars, also known as The Snake and the Stallion, released in 2002. While I was already familiar with the name of Carroll Shelby and the Shelby Cobra, I wasn't familiar with the story behind it or of a connection to Ferrari. And soon after, I came across a trailer for another documentary film based on the same topic and time period, the 24-Hour War, released in 2016. I'll include relevant links below in the description should you wish to check these out for yourself. From these documentaries, I learned so much more about the origins of the Shelby Cobra and the Ford GT, and so much more about those who designed, developed, tested and raced them. Many were World War II veterans and acted as mechanics, testers and race drivers, working in small teams, inventing and innovating as they went along. My father was an interesting character, and the stories of those behind the Cobra and the Ford GT reminds me of him. And so, in the spirit of something Jimmy noted in his video, how it's great that you can simulate driving your favorite classic car on a circuit that is no longer available, I thought it might be interesting to try and simulate racing the various versions of the Shelby Cobra and the Ford GT that competed with Ferrari at Le Mans, and while doing so include some notes on the cars and the people behind them. We'll begin our first event by simulating the 1963 24 Hours of Le Mans. We'll be driving the Shelby Cobra 427 SC, which is included with Assetto Corsa, and we'll be driving against the Ferrari 250 GTO, which is included with the Ferrari 70th Anniversary Pack DLC.
P14, get ready.
Okay, so we're starting a 5-lap race against the AI, and I've started at the rear in the Shelby Cobra 427 SC, short for semi-competition. This is a 500 brake horsepower car, and this version is, as I said, was developed by Kunos. I have some mods of this car, but they are variants of this one, and one of them doesn't function for AI races, so I just decided to go with the stock version, so to speak, or the version included with Assetto Corsa and the 250 GTO. So both cars were developed by Kunos, but this is a mod track, so I'm hoping that the race will function okay. What's interesting about this race, Le Mans, the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1963, was that the Cobra appeared in a hardtop version, which was required. I couldn't find a hardtop version for Assetto Corsa, so we go with this one. It's the best we can do, I suppose. I'm running with damage off, because otherwise I'll either crash or end up with a broken gearbox or engine before the end of the race. And I have fuel usage on and tyre wear on, just for fun. And one of the issues the Cobra had at Le Mans in '63 was trying to keep up with the 250 GTO on the Mulsanne straight, because it wasn't strictly made for speed. And at that time, of course, the Mulsanne straight was a straight, whereas nowadays it's broken up by chicanes to slow cars down. Now, let's see if we can stay on the road and keep up. It's difficult to talk and drive at the same time, as most people usually say. A funny side note about this particular car: there's a livery available for the car which is similar to one which appears on a Shelby Cobra in the Iron Man movie with Robert Downey Jr., directed by Jon Favreau. Actually, there's a blue and white one up ahead. That's the one I'm talking about. Anyway, I had seen the movie quite a few years ago when it released, and recently one weekend and my wife and son were watching it, and I was passing by in the background, and on screen I saw the Shelby Cobra. Now, at the time when I originally saw the film, I wouldn't have known what the Shelby Cobra was, but now, thanks to sim racing, or no thanks, some might say, I was able to recognize it. So in the scene, he's testing out his Iron Man costume, or Iron Man suit rather. I guess it's Mark 2 or 3, and he's about to fly, and in the background is this beautiful Shelby Cobra. So he takes off, and spoiler, he crashes down through the ceiling, through a grand piano, through the floor, and down into the workshop, and lands on top of the Shelby Cobra, of course. Obviously it wasn't an original, so just some kind of mock-up or effect or whatever. But I was in the background going, no, not the Shelby Cobra. My wife and son were like, go away, you nerd. Let us finish watching the film. So now I'm coming to the end of my first lap, and surviving so far. Switch one. I can switch to another virtual desktop in Assetto Corsa, so I don't have to have all the controls available, and I'm using voice controls to switch them, so I don't have to map a button to the wheel because I don't have enough buttons, so voice control is handy for that. For example, I can turn the virtual mirror on and off. Mirror. That's kind of handy, you know. And what I can do is make the terms the same for each and every game I play. So I know, for example, I use the common words and use the same word, and then map the controls accordingly. So it's easy to remember. Easier than remembering keyboard shortcuts, that's for sure. So we'll talk a bit about Carroll Shelby, because this was the point of this exercise, or point of the idea behind the video, if you will. So Carroll Shelby came from a relatively poor background, and before racing he was a chicken farmer in Texas, and he went to race in Europe, and he drove for Aston Martin in Monaco, Monza, and at Spa in Belgium. And one of the interesting things about him was that at one time he was working on the chicken farm, and he got called to go and see a race car, and he left his chicken farm overalls on and went to check the car, and somebody he met there said, you know what, it might be a good idea to leave the overalls on as a kind of a way to be remembered, so as a trademark, so to speak. So when he went to race in Europe, he would wear the chicken farmer overalls, which is kind of interesting. One of the GTOs has crashed. I noticed in Assetto Corsa that even though I have damage turned off, that if somebody comes off the track, spins out, the game will just retire them. I don't know why, but it seems to happen. I don't know if it's because I'm using, for example, Dennis Mercer has retired. I don't know if this is because I'm using a mod track. I must test it. So Carroll Shelby stayed with Aston Martin, and at the time he could have also drove for Ferrari, but he saw Ferrari as being very political internally, so he decided to stay with Aston Martin. Now I'm trying to listen to the crew chief at the same time, and my spotter. So he stayed with Aston Martin, and he drove in the 1959 24 Hours of Le Mans for Aston Martin, and he won, which is amazing. And when you think of how it must have been back then. But the thing was, he didn't tell anybody he had a hereditary heart condition. His father had died, I think, at the age of 46 in 1943, I think it was. And Carroll had inherited the condition, angina, and while he was driving, he would keep nitroglycerin pills beneath his tongue. So imagine that he completed the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 1959 for Aston Martin, and was, oh, there's a crash, and was only able to finish because he had nitroglycerin pills beneath his tongue, which is just crazy. But that's one of the fascinating things about him, I suppose. So before I continue, one side note on the subject of Aston Martin. I, like many, I follow Nicki Thiim on YouTube, and Nicki Thiim is a real racing driver from Denmark, who is also streaming and making YouTube videos, which is very interesting. And in the real world, as a real racing driver, he drives for Aston Martin and has been testing the 2018 Aston Martin V8 Turbo Vantage, the GTE car. And it's great to see a real racing driver active in sim racing and also making content for the internet. And I enjoy Nicki. I like his carefree kind of attitude, which you could say the guys back in the day kind of also had. They were investigating different things and trying to use what was available. So maybe in a kind of a way, Nicki's doing the same. Now let's see if this 250 GTO is going to outpace me on the Mulsanne straight, as it would have been back in the day. And of course I don't have the hardtop, but I have the damage off, so I can over rev. Switch to, I go back to my main control screen, and as you can see, I guess I'm over 6,000 revs, 6,000 RPM rather, which wouldn't be correct. With damage on, I would already be out of the race by now. So Carroll Shelby went back to the States and had to obviously quit racing, and he started a racing school in California, and he was also a rep for one of the tire brands. I don't remember which one it was right now, but and he wanted to develop a car. And I think he approached General Motors, but General Motors had the Corvette Stingray, I think it is, and they were doing quite well, so there was nothing for him there. So then he approached Ford, and Ford had a new lightweight V8 engine, which was to be included or to be added or installed in a pickup truck for the Canadian market. And then he went to AC cars in the UK, which had a 20-year-old chassis of the Ace, the AC Ace. So he bought the Ace chassis from AC cars in the UK and put in the Ford V8, and we had the Cobra. So really, oh, I'm spinning out. Well, first mistake so far.
Dave, track limits, come on.
I know. I think I need to pit, do I? Let's see. Yeah, I need to pit now. Why I'm pitting, I don't know, but anyway. Let's see. Do I have my... Yeah. I won't change tires, I'll just use the default. And the thing is, the crew chief application, after 3 or 4 laps it will give you a fuel estimate, but I found that it hasn't been correct. Now in Assetto Corsa, after 2 or more laps it will give you a fuel estimate, and you can see the app there to the right of the wheel on the bottom of the screen gives you fuel related data. But I found that the crew chief app hasn't been reporting the amounts correctly, so I found I can't really use it. So let's see now. I'm going to pit for the 4th lap, just for the fun of it. Tell you what, let's change tires as well, and then we can see the car
2 laps left.
in
That's
all
the
its
distance. Should be
vintage
about
beauty.
0 laps of fuel remaining.
And there's the 250 GTO, which of course is the one of the most beautiful cars ever built. Now, it's nice how they've done the pit animations. It's really cool. Come on guys, hurry up, let's go. Now I don't need to worry about my fuel anymore. Controls.
All clear. Push now.
So I can turn off the using voice control. I can turn off the virtual desktop or the HUD, and then also switch between the virtual desktops, because you can have up to 4 in Assetto Corsa, and this on these screens you can decide which controls you want to have. So I can do controls, when it works, switch 1, switch 2, controls. No, seems like I'm over revving, but I'm not. And you can also, for example, use mirror to turn on the virtual mirror, and you can use this, for example, for multiple sims using the appropriate shortcut behind the application. Mirror, and I don't need it, of course, because there's nobody around me. Actually, what's interesting about the V8, which went inside the Shelby Cobra, and the fact that I wanted to talk about the Shelby Cobra and the origin of the Ford GT. The 2017 Ford GT has a 4-valve twin-cam turbo V6, and the V6 is interesting because most of these cars, the GT and GTLM cars, they would have like V8, V10, V12, I suppose. Well, V8 mostly, I suppose, nowadays. But the Ford is V6, and it shares 60%. Oh no, there we go. Crash. I'm not concentrating. It shares 60% of its components with the engine from the Ford F-150 truck. So similar to how the Shelby Cobra was developed with an engine, a V8 engine destined for a truck. The latest Ford GT, the ancestor of the Cobra, if you will, also is using an engine or engine parts which were designed for a truck. So that's a kind of a interesting side note, I suppose. Leaders on the final lap. Controls. Switch 1. Let's see now if I ask the crew chief. Oh, it's not working right now. I should be able to ask how my fuel is, but never mind. As I said, it's not working. Now, and the funny thing about it was the end of the story, so to speak, for this episode, when Carroll was trying to sell the concept of the Cobra with his first and only employee at the time, a lady. What they would do was, when they were bringing the car around to press and so on, they would take the one car and paint it several times to make it look like they had more cars than they actually did. So that's kind of interesting. I have a button mapped that I can talk to the crew chief and ask questions. For example, lap time, car status and so on, but it's not working right now, so I must have done something wrong. I'll finish anyway. One more lap to go. That's the thing when you're on PC. I'm running Assetto Corsa, crew chief, voice control. You're like a one-man crew of the Starship Enterprise. And as for remembering all the different options, well, and of course I'm also recording the screen and trying to record my voice at the same time and drive. So, and they say men can't multitask, or my wife says anyway. Now let's finish this. Try to remember. Oh, there I go. See?
Watch those track limits.
I know. Watch the track limits. Come on. Let's finish. Nobody's perfect. Especially not me. Now, let's finish this. I think everybody else has gone home at this stage. I guess I should mention I'm using head tracking. Well, it's like a... I know VR is the thing right now for immersion and so on, but I don't have a VR headset and I don't have hardware to support it either, so I use head tracking and it's okay. It's not perfect, but you can kind of look around. And then, for example, if the camera gets out of alignment, I can use center command to reposition the camera. So that's another center like that. So that's another shortcut I don't have to remember. As Gamer Muscle has pointed out, head tracking is not like one-to-one, and of course, as I said, it's not as immersive as it is in VR, but nevertheless, it's something. And I don't mind it. It's a cost-effective solution for now, until such time as VR is maybe possible. That's if you can get a GPU, because all the
Dave, track limits. Come on.
Oh, Dave. You can also get the crew chief to swear, but I have that option turned off. I don't need that today. Now let's finish this. Finally. You can see the lovely Cobra logo on the wheel, and you can even with head tracking, you can still look around the interior a bit. Feel the wind in your hair, so to speak. Oh no! What?
Come on.
What is going on? I do not know. Disgraceful. I really am not concentrating. No excuse, of course. Anyway, we shall endure. We shall finish. So, if you like this video, I would appreciate a like, and also subscribe if you will, because I plan to make some more episodes to continue the story, because I find it interesting. Now let's see if I can concentrate. I have crashed far too many times. It's far too embarrassing. No. Funny, when you pass this turn it says Maison Blanche, White House. I don't know what that refers to. I don't think that's in the current version of Le Mans. There is a version of Le Mans, a later version for Assetto Corsa, which is pretty okay. I think it was developed from a mod for R Factor 2 or R Factor or some such. There we go. Position 11. Only down to retirements, but there you go.
P11. There's the checkered flag.